Welcome to David's Harp Hotel. What makes this location unique is that your stay in Israel is not a tour, it's not a trip, it's a retreat. It's a retreat into the presence of Jesus in a place that he loves so much. There's so much to offer here. There's where Jesus delivered the demonized man. There's Bethsaida, where Peter and Andrew lived. Down the road is where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. He fed the 5,000. You can even climb Mount Arbel, where he gave the Great Commission. It was created through the vision of a believer in Yeshua. His name is Samuel Smadja. He is the founder of Sorel Tours and Conferences. It was his dream to see this hotel become a home for pilgrims around the world right here on the Sea of Galilee. I'd like you to meet Samuel and hear his story. Well, Samuel, thank you so much for being here and enjoying the beautiful hotel here at David's Harp. Describe to the folks who are watching where we are and what we're seeing around us.
So we are really in the epic center of the story. Just looking behind me and looking at this hotel is a story of a miracle and the grace of God. By the grace of God, together with TBN, we created a center for people from around the world to come and to relax and to sit and to meditate in the Word of God, overlooking this amazing place in the Galilee.
What do you want people to experience here that they wouldn't experience at a commercial hotel?
The peace of God. I know that by the time the people arrive here, they're tired, they have their own problems, they have their own struggles. I want them to come here, sit on one of the balconies, just walk around and talk to the Creator and say, okay, God, what's my purpose here on this earth? I want people going back home to be much stronger believers. So I want to call you and I want to ask you and motivate you to come. I believe it's an investment that you can do both in your spiritual life and investment in your relationship and your stand with the people of Israel. So, like we say in Israel, Bashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem.
Three years ago, I put out to the Gathering House, hey, does anybody want to do a trip to Israel with me and see what God would do? And we started planning it, and then the war broke out, and then it got postponed, and then we rescheduled it, and then that got postponed. And then we were going to go in May of 2025, and 3 days before we left, Lufthansa pulled the flights and canceled them, so we couldn't go. And we rescheduled for February, and we finally were able to go and experience what we could experience on this retreat in Israel. There was 19 of us, I think 11 from the church, 12 from the church, and another few people from North Carolina, old friends of mine, and a few others. And we encountered God. We went from way up north above the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Negev Desert, visiting all kinds of sites. The Nova Festival site where 316 young people were massacred on October 7th. We also went to a church that was just right off of Gaza, and that church had for 15, 20 years experienced rocket bombings in their city, and when the sirens went off, they had 9 seconds to make it to a bomb shelter, and they had talked about that. We visited 4 different churches, had all kinds of incredible experiences. Few of us want to share what we learned about ourselves, what we learned about God on this trip, and I'll have them come up in a moment, but before I do, we have we actually have a gift for you. We want to do this. We want the kids to come and pass these out. We had a couple of kids who were going to help us. Was Willow going to help us with this? Willow, come on up. You're going to help us. We have some olive wood crosses that each of you can take, and we need one more kiddo if we've got one more. You'll be our kiddo for today. Thank you, Rhonda, with your childlike ways. You fit right in. So I just want to share a couple things that I experienced, and we'll bring a panel of 8 up here and have them share what they experienced. And you never know when you're traveling around Israel what's going to hit you and what isn't. and what you will experience and what you won't. And for me, I would share a couple of spots. One of them was in Capernaum. Where that hotel was you just saw, that's where we stayed for 4 nights, great. And that balcony looked right down on the ancient ruins of Capernaum. And I think I've got a couple of pictures of what Capernaum looks like. I think I do, if they're up there, Amelia. I'm not sure if I've got my slides going. So, yeah, there we go. So this is a church built over the ruins of the Jewish quarter in the city of Capernaum where Jesus did most of his ministry. And so in that church, it was built over an old Byzantine church, built over an even older Byzantine church, built over a house. And I think one of our panel people will be talking about that. But that was the ruins of Capernaum, which we could walk to from our hotel. And then the next slide, I kind of walked down by the beach, by the shore. They got this great statue of Peter. And I walked just past the statue of Peter, and I noticed something that sort of shifted my brain quite a bit. For one, we had just come off the Sea of Galilee. We had been doing a boat sail, and we came off, and they put in a dock. And as we're walking up the shore to Capernaum, I noticed the shore was big boulders and rocks everywhere. There's no beach on the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is rocks everywhere. And I always pictured, for some reason, and I don't know why, I picked beaches, even though we don't have many beaches on the lake. So I walked down there, and I noticed something. I saw these old piers sticking out that they had kind of graveled in and put modern railings on. And I saw that the stones of those piers were the same level as the ancient ruins. And so I asked the guide, I said, is that original? Is that from first century? He said, yes, those stone piers would have been first century. They've been rebuilt and modernized, and we've just put walkways out there. So at one time, the water was all the way up to where those piers are. And, of course, human use and all that has drained the Sea of Galilee a bit, drained the Jordan River a bit. It's not as wide as it used to be. And it suddenly dawned on me for the first time. You know, there's a story when it says that Jesus was walking by the seashore, and he calls the apostles. And Peter and his brother Andrew and James and John drop their nets, and they follow Jesus, and they begin their ministry. I don't know about you, but in my brain, that was always a lovely sandy beach. And in my brain, when I pictured it, the 2 guys have their little boat, the 4 guys have their little boat pulled up to the beach in a nice area. Nobody else is around. And Jesus comes walking by, and in a very private moment, they encounter the Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ, and he says, hey, come and follow me. And they drop their nets knowing he's Messiah, and they walk off that beautiful sandy beach, and they follow him into history, right? That's how I pictured it, and I think TV's to blame. Is that how you've always pictured that? I stood there for a while, and I looked at the first century docks. And I realized Jesus walked down to the dockyard, and he calls the apostles out of the docks. Think of that, the seagulls screaming and sailors cussing and fish coming in, being over. It makes sense. Why would fishermen drag their fish up on a sandy beach? And they wouldn't do that. They'd come into the docks, and they would offload there. And I sat there looking at that for a while thinking, when he calls the apostles, it's not in a moment where they have this private time with God. It's in the chaos of life. And in the middle of the chaos of life, Jesus comes walking and he says, hey, come and follow me. And out of the docks, these guys drop their nets and they follow Jesus. And that has rung my bell because it made me think how many times for you and I is God speaking in the chaos of our ordinary lives, but we don't hear him. And is he saying, come and follow me? And I had a conversation with Chris Wright the other day. We were laughing about this. And he said, Jesus might have stood there and said, hey, come follow me. And those were the only 4 guys willing to drop their nets, right? Very interesting because it gives it a different flavor and feel when you realize Jesus doesn't call them off of some pristine sandy beach. He calls them out of the chaos of the docks where the fishermen were. And that stayed with me for a while. And that made me rethink the whole story. The another place was, and it's walking distance from Capernaum, is this place called the Primacy of Peter. And there's a little chapel built there because, as you know, in the ancient world where the Bible sites are, the Greek Orthodox and the Catholics have built churches everywhere. So there's a little church built on this one place that is a little beach. It's about 20 minutes walk down from Capernaum. And there we are in our group listening to the guide talk about this little spot. And I walked down towards the beach. And show me the next slide. There's a little, this is where Peter, after the resurrection, would have met Jesus. And the next slide shows this is the closest you come to a beach. And those aren't pebbles, those are seashells. a whole thing full of little tiny, tiny seashells, just a whole, and it's like, okay, so this is the place they say that when Jesus, after the resurrection, Peter says, I'm going fishing. I'm going fishing. And so they go, oh, we'll go with you. This is John 21. And in John 21, the disciples go back to fishing. It's all over. They've followed Jesus for 3.5 years. He was crucified down in Jerusalem. They saw him resurrected. He tells them to go up to Galilee. They go back to Galilee, and they're sitting around in Galilee wondering, what was that all about? And so Peter says, I'm going fishing. And this spot on this beach is where they say, it's because it's the only beach that Jesus could have been on where they could have landed a boat in the area. They say they came in here, and this is where they encounter him, and this is where Peter has the experience of 3 times Jesus asked him, do you love me? Well, then feed my sheep. Do you love me? Well, then feed my sheep. And I was thinking about that as I was sitting there, and like Peter, Capernaum, where he got called, is about 10 minutes walk up the road. And where this beach is, 10 minutes walk south, it's like it's been 3.5 years. What did he see in that 3.5 years? And when Jesus first called him, he was thinking in the terms of, hey, I'm going to go on this grand adventure with this incredible rabbi, and this rabbi does miracles, and it's going to lead us to overthrowing Rome, and he's going to be the Messiah, and he's going to set up a throne in Jerusalem, and I'm going to rule and reign with him in this political fashion. And that's what he thought when he first met Jesus and took off. And then after Jesus' crucifixion, death, and resurrection, now he's standing on this beach, and he's like, I don't know what to do with myself. Everything I thought was going to happen didn't happen. Everything I thought my life was going to do, it didn't happen. And now I'm on this beach. I don't know what to, I guess I'll go back to fishing because it's what I know how to do now. And I'll just think about what was that all about. And there he meets Jesus. And 3 times Jesus tells him what it was all about. What was it all about? 3 times he says, feed my sheep. Just take care of the people who love me. It's not about grand, glorious, heroics, being the champion, just 3 times he says, just love the people who love me, take care of the people who love me. Peter, that's what it was always all about. And that struck me sitting on that beach thinking that's true for you and I. Not being grand heroes or champions or popular or famous or, being YouTube successful influencers or on TV or whatever. The reality is we get the same message. Do you love me? And Peter says, yes. Do you love me? Jesus asked us, and we say yes. He goes, then take care of everybody else who loves me too. Just watch out for them. Protect them, love them, take care of their needs. That's all this is all about. And so that was shifting gears for me to stand on that beach and think that way. So I've invited 8 people, or 7 other people, I'm the 8th, to come on up here. And they're going to come on. They're going to come up here and grab a chair, and they're going to share a couple of things that they experienced while they were in Israel too as well. So just sit anywhere. I don't even know what the order is. The order is going to be, I got a little, Amelia gave me a little order in our side. So come on up, grab a seat, and Tom, take that one. All right. What do you have, 1 chair too many? Am I missing somebody? Okay. All right, so I've given my little pitch, and I believe next in the order is Jim. Grab the microphone, Jim. So I've asked him to say, hey, just give me a couple things that you learned or thought about yourself or about God while you were on this trip. What rang your bell or triggered your thinking?
Is this thing on? Is it working? Okay. Mine was, there were a couple of them, but the one is the House of Peter. I think we kind of had a thing of that. And as we tour a lot of places, it's kind of like Jesus was here somewhere right out here. We aren't exactly sure where. And that's really, really cool that, he might have been there to over here somewhere on the Sea of Galilee, right out of here. That's really cool. But Peter's house is one of those that just because of things that have been built upon it over these 2,000 years, that it was kind of held sacred. And there's a very high probability that is Peter's house that Jesus went to. And so for me, what struck me is it wasn't just Jesus was here somewhere in this area. I would have seen him. What kept bouncing in my ears was he left footprints right there. And I would have seen him walking into that house a number of times. And that, to me, that just stuck. And I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it, because I think there's something bigger than just that's cool and I would have seen Jesus there. There's got to be something deeper and bigger. And a lot of us spoke throughout the week, the 10 days of there was just so much. To me, it's kind of like, okay, God, you're going to throw all this stuff against the wall. What do you want to stick for me? Because it'll be different for every person, the stuff that sticks. And sometimes that might take a few minutes. Sometimes it might take a few weeks. Might even take a few years that we'll come back and go, wow, that changed me, my soul. And so that's the first one, the big one that I'm thinking about, is that Jesus left footprints right there, not here somewhere, which is cool too, but right there. And I'm still waiting for God to tell me, so what do you want me to do with that? What do you want me to do with that? The Southern Steps were the same thing. We were there. I got the privilege to go about a year and a half ago also. So some of this, Peter's house was a first for me. The Southern Steps, we had been there before. And so this time, again, it's kind of the same thing. This is where Jesus went. They're super, super high probability that he walked through the gate. And that, like, remember the story when he was 12 years old and they took off, and then a day or so later they figured out he wasn't with them, so they had to go back and find him teaching on the steps, because those are the steps where the rabbis and stuff hung out and taught. And again, it was that same thing. We had some free time right there, longer than normal, which was really cool to have about 20 minutes to a half hour to kind of wander and do what we wanted. And I remember just kind of, I couldn't move for a while up on that upper part, up by the wall, looking at, there's 3 arches, and the middle arch is the one he would have gone through many, many times. And again, it was that same impression of Jesus walked through those. He left footprints right there. My Lord and Savior. And what do you want me to do with that? And then, I just kind of got stuck. I couldn't move. And I'm one of those tough guys that I got some dust in my eyes or something there for a while. And, it just kind of shook me to my core a little bit about how close I was to where our God, our Savior, physically was when he was on the planet Earth. And it was pretty cool. And then I'd look down the stairs and say, I wonder where he was teaching. Maybe it was right here and I would have heard him. When he was 12, maybe I'd have seen him, in his, about my Father's business. So it's still that kind of just a carryover, 3 or 4 days difference. So I think God's got something big inside that he's still working on with me there, but it sure grabbed my attention that Jesus left footprints right there. Not here, but right there.
Yeah, so would you see the 3 arches there in the middle of that southern wall? That's the entryway up to the Temple Mount at one. They're all walled in now, but in Jesus' day, those would have been gateways leading up into the Temple Mount. And on those steps right below was where rabbis sat and talked and where teaching was often done. And so you're standing on those steps and you're realizing, one, yes, the only way in and out of the temple was through those gates. Jesus and the apostles for sure walked right on these same stones. And you have a different feeling of being connected. And then we would realize, too, that it was here that Mary and Joseph would have walked up to dedicate Jesus in the temple on that exact spot right there. And that when Jesus was found at 12 years old talking to the rabbis, it would have been on these steps. And then on the last week of his life, coming and going. And there's, as the guide said at one point, there's a lot of maybe, give or take 20 yards, give or take 100 feet. But he said, for sure, if you want one spot in all of Israel where you know Jesus walked for sure, it's those gates right there. So it makes you resonate with something different. Fred, I think you're next on our list. So share what you've got going.
Well, I too, like Jim, was very moved. I mean, Rob, throughout the tour, he mentioned that, there's places where we went that, 95%. You're 95% sure that this is actually the spot where Jesus and the disciples stood, where Jesus performed miracles, where he worked for his people. And St. Peter's Church there in Capernaum was one that really moved me, being raised a Catholic. And one thing the Catholics know how to do is make a shrine and relics. But I was very moved. Number one, what strikes you is the construction there. That church is set up so that it doesn't touch the ground of the actual churches before it. And the house is still preserved. And it's just this, it looks almost like a flying saucer the way it's sitting there. and you can see the old Byzantine churches that were built around it. So you know that this place was significant. And then in recent years, they found Peter's name inscribed in that house. And what struck me was to stand there in that glass in the center of the church and then look down into the house and think, is this what the invalid saw when he was lowered into Peter's house? And it was really moving for me. It was one of those places where I wished, we had a lot of ground to cover, but I really do wish we'd have had more time. Because like Jim, I felt like God was speaking to me. I didn't get the full message, but I did feel that he wanted me there. And it was very important, very moving. As you can see, the glass there is wonderfully constructed so that you can see right down into the house. It's a beautiful cathedral or church. The second spot for me was, it's very personal. Rhonda helped me arrange to plant a tree for my grandson who was stillborn at 22 weeks this past May. She found a memorial garden for babies there in Israel at Latour that is specifically for children and babies that were lost to abortion or stillborn. And it's a beautiful orchard maintained by Catholic monks. It's an olive orchard. And there we planted a cypress tree, a Mediterranean cypress tree. They grew up to over 100 feet tall. You see them all over Israel. And they live for hundreds of years. The way that they plant these trees is to break the wind for the orchards around there. And what moved me was I felt somewhat selfish taking time from our tour to do this for my grandson. But I wanted roots in Israel, and it's considered a great honor to memorialize someone with a tree in Israel in the Holy Land. And my family now has roots there forever. But what I didn't expect was that it was a moving moment. We could definitely feel God at work because 4 or 5 other people ended up joining in and planting trees for lost children that they had and experiences in their lives. And it was a very, very, definitely God was at work that day. Rob did a great job with the sermon. It was a long day because that day we went from there to Serdar and the Nova Festival. It was a emotionally draining day.
Yeah, it was something we set out for Fred to do because he wanted to do this because we had planted a tree up north in a kibbutz that we got to. We got to go into a kibbutz and meet those people. We planted a tree there, and we thought originally we were just going to plant a second tree at the kibbutz. But somehow all the communication, talking to Israelis, they're like, oh, no, we're going to put your tree in this other garden, which was a whole different day. And so we went down to this garden, and you could clearly tell it was a God moment because Fred was going to plant a tree for his lost grandson. And he had some notes and stuff that they put in that you put down in the roots of the tree, and that they would be there permanently. And there was at least 4 other people with us on the trip that had a profound experience in that moment. And the planting of the trees became very real, somber, powerful, emotionally healing, cathartic. It was powerful. And it was sort of like when you're on the trip, it's one of those things. Look, I'm a history guy. I'm like, let's go see some old ruins. Let's go see some stones. That's me. And I realized, sort of like God was saying, Rob, sit still, be quiet. I'm doing a work here. Right. What you think is important is not. This is what's important. And I came home. One of the big things I thought is, we have these architectural plans to redo our parking lot in the back. And there's trees that are supposed to go right down post on the street and trees in the corner. And I thought when the day comes that we're going to plant our trees, we're going to do something unique. The trees are going to be memorable. The trees are going to mean something to people. The trees are going to be in memoriam. And I took that away. But that was a powerful moment. And you could tell there were several people with us on the trip that were not expecting it and got hit by God. And that was a powerful place. Real quick on the Peter's house. Back up to my first slide there, Amelia, on mine really quick. That is the Catholic Church Fred's talking about, and it's built over the top of a little rock square house, all that's left of the foundations, where they dug it and they found a stone inside that house with Peter's name. And then around that was a Byzantine foundation of a church. And then around that was another bigger foundation of a church. And then the Catholics dropped a church that hovers over the site. And in the center floor of that church, if you walked into that church, the center floor is a glass that looks down into Peter's house. So Peter's house is where the paralytic was lowered and was healed through the roof. Peter's mother-in-law was healed. Jesus would have come in and out of this house. Why would there be a church built over any random house in Capernaum? That's the question the archaeologists ask. And their answer is because this was a venerated spot. It stayed precious to people. So they built a church on it a century later, and then a bigger church later. And then when they found the stone with Peter's name on it, they're like, aha, that's it. This is where the house that Jesus would have stayed in when he was in Capernaum. And that was a powerful place. So, all right, I've got Jennifer next. Jennifer, there you are, Jennifer. And let's skip up to the Jennifer slides. I think hers is Shiloh.
Okay, so I brought notes because I don't like to talk in front of people. When we were in the airport in Tel Aviv, we were talking about what we were hoping to experience in Israel, and I really just wanted to meet God. I've been kind of going through a spiritually dry time in my life and feeling like his presence wasn't very loud and powerful. Kind of identify with what Rob was talking about Peter and wanting a big emotional experience. And so I joined this retreat to go to Israel, and I'm going to go there and experience God in a big, powerful way. And about halfway through our trip, we'd spent the first half up in the Galilee area that you were just seeing the pictures of, and it was very interesting, but it was not a huge emotional experience for me yet, and so I was a little disappointed. And we were headed down to Jerusalem this day, and we stopped at Shiloh, which is where, when the Israelites first came into the Promised Land, they set up the tabernacle to worship God. And they were there for I think the tabernacle was there for about 400 years, not quite, 400 years. And before we went there, I read a story of Hannah, who was at Shiloh praying to God. And I just want to read that to you. Out of 1 Samuel, part of her story, she was childless, and she was praying to God about this. Once after a sacrificial meal in Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, "O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. And as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut." As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she'd been drinking. Must you come here drunk?" he demanded. "Throw away your wine." "Oh, no, sir," she replied. "I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged and pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out in great anguish and sorrow." "In that case," Eli said, "go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him." And as I read that in the morning before we went there, I thought, oh, this is going to be my big moment. There have been moments when I've been praying in anguish for my own kids. Most of you know Sarah, Maria, and Claire. Claire's in the back today with the kids. And at times, and even now, they've walked away from the Lord to some degree, and it's been a really anguish-filled time for me, and I've prayed out to the Lord, but that's kind of dried up as of late. You can only cry I can only cry so much, and so I asked God that morning, break my heart for my kids when I go pray at Shiloh today. So I went up to Shiloh, and I got out my Bible, and I read the scripture again, and I prayed for them. And I do think that the Lord is answering that prayer. I was able to write the prayers in my journal, and I think that he is answering them in his own way, in his own time, but it wasn't a huge moving experience again, and I was really kind of disappointed. And the next morning, we woke up for the first morning in Jerusalem, and I was in the lobby getting ready to go to our first day in Jerusalem, and I was talking to Tanya, and I told her that. I said, I'm just this is interesting. Rob's a great teacher. I love learning the history. I love to teach the Bible, but it's kind of all intellectual, and I'm underwhelmed, and I'm really disappointed. And Tanya just kind of validated me in that moment and said, the first time I came, it didn't hit me until a week after we got home, what God was doing in my heart because of this trip. And for the first moment, I just felt his spirit rush over me. It was like, it's okay. I'll speak to you when I speak to you in the way I'm going to speak to you. And I cried in the bus all the way to Jerusalem that morning. We walked up to the Temple Mount that morning, and I just felt a relief that I don't have to make these big emotional moments happen. And I began to just kind of settle in and enjoy the trip, enjoy my time with the Lord. The prayers were good. They just weren't big and powerful. And then I think there's some pictures of the Garden of Gethsemane because he did show up there for me the next morning. Right here, yeah. Go back one. So the next morning, our second morning in Jerusalem, we started out at the Garden of Gethsemane, and we gathered around, and we were talking about how Jesus was there right before his arrest and crucifixion. He was praying that the Lord would take this cup from him. And we were reminded that his decision to go ahead and go through with it may have been the biggest decision for all mankind. And then we were given, like we were in Shiloh, we were given some time to go on our own and pray. So I took my Bible and my journal again, and I found a stone, and I went over in this garden with all these olive trees where Jesus would have been praying that morning before he was arrested. And again, I turned in my Bible to that story from Mark chapter 14. And as I was reading through it, the part that really stuck out to me is verses 37 and 38. After Jesus had been praying, came back and found the disciples sleeping. He said, and he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying so that you will not come into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And it wasn't loud, but it was powerful. That was his message to me, to keep watching and keep praying. He knows my spirit is weak. He knows my flesh is weak. He knows my spirit is willing, though, and he will answer my prayers. He will show up for me. And even as I've come home, I've been delighted that as I read Scripture, reading in Numbers and in Mark this week, it is more alive, it's more real, it's more vibrant, and I just trust that he'll continue to do that. And as far as my children go, I know he's going to answer those prayers, and I'm going to keep praying and keep watching. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, Gethsemane means olive press. That's what the meaning of the word is. You know you're in an olive orchard and experiencing all that went with that. One of the things we did learn there, too, was Jesus in that night, he's 3 times he has his prayer. And we were all connecting to 3 times olives get pressed and crushed until they get all that needs to come out of them. So quite a connection. Alice, I think you're up next. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, keep talking. Okay. This was one of the things we did on our last day. We walked in the tunnels underneath Jerusalem. And I think this is one of the natural water what? Cisterns, yeah, that is still there today. And I think one of the most amazing things is that because everything that they did, if they destroyed something, they built on top of it. So here we are, way down in the tunnel, and to think that even farther, as we're walking in these little tiny things, they still have these like plexiglass areas, and you can look down, and it's even farther down that the roads were built. And then after this, we were walking up. This is one of the big bricks. It's panorama because I couldn't get it all, but there were 2 people at either end, and that was kind of like the largest stone that went across. And to think, without technology, how did they make that move? And how did they get it there? So there was a lot of, like, true amazement, how smart they were. And, yeah, the things that they were able to do. And then I think, this was our first day, and this is the boat we got on to go on the Sea of Galilee. And since it was day one, it was just like, okay, I know some of the things we were told that we might see are kind of, sort of, they think that this is true, but we're not sure, So you had to kind of, we'd go to Rob, what's the percentage that this is really real? Or is this just a tourist trap, And so, the Sea of Galilee, that is true. And it was kind of a really dusty day because of some big dust storm that had happened in the desert. So that's why you can't see very well. But I mean, just like gave me goosebumps to think this really is where Jesus was. This is where his disciples were. And here I am in a boat, going down, and they're, sharing about these are where the majority of all the miracles happen. And I can't remember if it was our tour guide or if it was Rob who said, put your arms out. He says, just think, within that area, that's where the miracles happened. And like I said, it was just a goosebump moment because it was true. It made the Bible come to life. And as we've been reading the Bible in a year thing, right? It's neat to say, okay, my geography sucks. So like when Rob teaches, I really have to pay attention. Oh, here and here and here. So now, being in the place, personalizing it, when it says we went to Capernaum and then they went to Jerusalem and they went here, and it's like, you look at the land and you think, they walked that. When Jesus went up to the mountain and said, oh no, now we're going to go back down here. We walked, but we were in a bus, And here, they were walking, and they didn't have roads, and trails and things like that. So they were really fit, I just have to say. But yeah, the Sea of Galilee was one of my favorites because then we were able to go down where we were on that seashore, right? And I had good shoes on, so I had water shoes on, so I was able to walk through. Tom took his sandals off, and he didn't know it was shells. And he's going, ooh, 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 and then finally looked down there, and we're going, no wonder it hurts. Those are little tiny shells. And so then we were able to actually got in the water. It's like, all right, we are in the water. Now we are literally in the water. And Jesus walked on the water, the disciples, all those things. And just one more of those moments where it was like, I'm here centuries later, thousands of years later, but I get to be here too. And it just made, the Bible come to life.
All right. Thanks, Alice. Tom, I think you're up.
First thing I say is wow. When we started talking, let me rephrase that. When someone said, we're married, now we're going to Israel. Okay, I'm in. And going to Israel was great, but, I wasn't super excited about it until we got there. Hey, Jim, that dust in your eye? It was amazing. That picture of a boat there, all the stuff that's a boat from Christ's time. All the things they went through to get that out, keep it intact. There's a possibility that was a boat that Christ was in when he calmed the seas. I thought it'd be kind of cool to crawl in there and see if I could see if he carved his name in there. Pretty sure it wasn't in English, wouldn't have done any good, but just seeing a boat standing really close to the sea, the body of water where Christ did so many miracles was unbelievable. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was great. The second thing that came out to me, Rob mentioned the kibbutz we went to. Heard about that, and I thought, yeah, it'd be cool. We heard that the people in the kibbutz see tour buses go back and forth and nobody'd ever stop. And we had the chance to do that. I thought, cool, this sounds great. I didn't know what a kibbutz was, but sounds great. So we learned more about it, and we got there and walked around, and the grounds were unbelievably beautiful. You can see the little river that runs through there, several little waterfalls, just unreal. And the more we walked through it, I know, yeah, this is great. Everything's pretty cool. Later on, within a couple days, Yuval, our tour guide, I think he's the one who brought out the scripture about seeds that are planted. Some are thrown out, end up on the path. They don't grow. Some are in rocks and thistles and that. They don't grow. And then there's some that land in good soil. And it hit me that that's what we were doing. We were there planting seeds. Hopefully, we were also helping fertilize the ones that were there, that something will start growing. We never need to know if it did or it didn't. That's not for us to know. It's God's timing. Let him do his thing. And that just, as soon as something was, the rest of the trip, that after we left there, kind of stuck out to me. That was something memorable. And as soon as something was said about being up here today, that was the first thing I thought about. We stopped. We ministered to them. The people were unbelievably great. God ministered through us to them. And we had the privilege of being part of it.
Thank you. Yeah, at the kibbutz, which, as you mentioned, tour buses never stop. Phillip's house was able to get us in there through a connection, and so we get to meet Israeli people. This kibbutz is way up on the northern border, right by Syria. And an IDF colonel who lives in that kibbutz spent time talking to us about what he's doing now with his life. And he goes into Syria with some other soldiers, and they find kids who need medical care. And they bring them back into Israel, and they give them surgeries, and they give them all their medical care that they need. There are all kinds of damage that's been done on their lives from war. And then the Syrian little kids realize these Israelis are people, and they don't hate us. And he says, what we're doing here is hoping that the next generation of Syrians are going to have examples. These little kids are going to grow up to remember that we helped cure their lives, and they won't hate us so much. And so that's what he's doing. I wouldn't call it a ministry. They weren't followers of Jesus. I don't even think they were followers of God. They were, they lived on a kibbutz like communists. So, but they were great people, and that was one of the best lunches we ever had too. There when they cooked us a home-cooked meal. So, all right, Laurel.
Hello. Oh, that's the last slide. Keep going. I sent them to in the reverse order. Yeah, that one, we could start with that one. Yep, that's fine too. For me, we started the journey in Galilee. Galilee is like the Israeli countryside. It was very peaceful and beautiful. It was 70 degrees. And my first impression of the place was how green it was. Driving from the airport or around town out the bus window, you could see vineyards and orchards and farmland. There was little yellow flowers there and basalt, the big black rocks. You saw it in the beach pictures. It was also on buildings and landscaping, just black rocks. And I just looked around and said, I know this place. This is Washington State. And that was really important to me because it felt like home, but it felt like really familiar, like a hug. And like for me and for all of you, you don't have to travel around the world to meet with God and find him, because he's here with us. And you can be sure that when you drive through Washington and the scrub brush and everything, that that's what Galilee looks like. And it just, that idea of God's in all places at all times was really brought home for me, in that with the, literally brought home for me. And the first picture before on the beach, that was just to show some of the big basalt boulders that made up that walkway out to our boat on the Sea of Galilee. So that was the countryside. Yep, the next one here, our second half of the tour was in Jerusalem as a home base. And my impression there, I just love these pictures. Like, look at that ancient wall, but it's built on an even more ancient mountain. You know, that's like Mount Moriah, where Abraham was called to sacrifice Isaac and to give up his son, and that's where Jerusalem is, and that's where Jesus died, and God gave up his son. And it was just the foundation, the ancient foundation. It felt to me like, you know, in this place, there was, we have the past and the present and the future, like the beginning and the middle and the end of time, and it's all here. And all around the city, they're having archaeological digs, just like dug up a parking lot. And here's like the top layer is only 400 years old, and the second layer is only 800 years old, and the bottom layer that they can't, you know, get all the way down to because they would dig up all the other layers, that's the 2,000-year-old layer. And in lots of places, they were getting down to the mountain, like under the temple. Like, you're in these huge caverns in the mountain, and you could touch it and you could see it. And for the first time, I just felt like I was in like reality, like the past, present, and future, like I said, and that all these other places in the world are like in an alternate dimension or a distorted reality. You know, I feel like a lot of us don't know if we're coming or going, where we're going, up or, you know, is it up or is it down? What's our purpose? And I just connected so much with the place, with all of Israel. And is there a next picture? I just felt like God is in this place, even though it's, you know, he's in every place, but God's here. He's keeping his promises to the land of Israel, you know, and he chose this place and these people for all time. And that just touched me in an existential way. So that's just a picture in Gethsemane of a really old olive tree and a new olive tree growing up next to it.
So one of the discussions that we had when we were there was how ordinary everything was. You know, like Alice mentioned, we stood on the hilltop where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, looking down at the Sea of Galilee, and the guide said, look at that hill over there, point to it. We all did. Look at that hilltop over there, point to it. We did, so our arms were like that. And he says, almost all of Jesus' miracles were done in between your outstretched arms right now. And your first impression was, but it's so small on the planet, right? The Sea of Galilee is, you know, it's like being on Ponderay Lake. It made me think about this, you know, the disciples rowing, and they can't get in because there's a massive windstorm. They row and row till Jesus walks on the water in the middle of the night. One of the frustrating things is you could see the shore. You can see all the way across the lake. It's not like Lake Michigan. And we began to talk about how ordinary it was and how it's not so big. And it's just, and we said, but this is where God came down, and this is where God's stories are birthed, and this is where God did mighty things. And the ordinariness of it was comforting because our lives are ordinary too. And if God can come down in an ordinary place like this, what could he do in our ordinary lives? And as Jennifer mentioned, the land isn't magical. You don't go there and feel magical, but you go there and there's an awakening that might happen because there's a connection to the stories. And you see things maybe for the first time, but the same Jesus who walked in Peter's house and walked up those stone steps in the flesh is alive in the spirit today and is sitting in that chair right there. And sitting in that chair right there. And he's sitting with you. And he walks into your house. And you can have that same Jesus by the power of his spirit sitting in your living room. And we were talking, that whole kind of dawning of Jesus walked into the ordinary lives of people. He can sure walk into my ordinary life too. And that awakening and that perspective and that realization of, oh, this is Jesus. He starts here, the stories are here, but the explosion happens from here, and then it goes global. And so that was powerful for all of us. And, and again, we're showing maybe 1/20th of all the places we went and the things we saw and what we did. That, and of course, I'd be like, oh, I'd go again in a heartbeat just to see more. And for the awakening that happens. But we wanted to come back and spend just one day sharing with you that I think you come back changed, even if you change from the ordinariness. It's like I don't come back thinking, oh my God, you got to go to Israel because you'll be so, magically transformed. No, you'll come back saying, it was great, it was wonderful, but I realized it was ordinary. And because it was ordinary, my life can be extraordinary because God, the same Jesus, can walk into my living room. And he does by the power of his Spirit. And he's available all the time. And he can call us out of the chaos of the docks of our lives too. And that's the thing what you start resonating with is you start seeing, oh, God is approachable now. And I'm being at Shiloh and looking at where the tabernacle stood for 369 years and standing there like Joshua stood right here and divided up the land. Gideon stood right here. Samson was here. Samuel stood here, right? You just realize Hannah was here praying. My gosh, you just see the power of it. Then you realize God is like saying, I'm not confined here. I was confined there because that was the tabernacle. You had to come there to worship. And now he's blown it globally. And he says, you can worship anywhere. And that same approachableness, that's what it means. So the veil was torn in two at Jesus' death. And we have access now to the throne of God. And so we come back just sort of awakened, powerful. I'd go again in a heartbeat. If we found another 15 people, be like, let's go in 2028 or 2029. Let's look at doing that. Because it is awakening. And we pick up the Bible and start reading it and go like, oh, I've stood here. I've stood where this story takes place. And I see it differently now. And that is some of the power. So we're available. Ruel's here. Yar's here. Yar's sitting at the back, right back there. He was with us. Where'd you go, Ruel? Where's Ruel? Right, we're sitting beside you. Those guys were with us as well. Rhonda and Tanya as well. And so if you want to spend any time talking to us about what the experience was like, and we would love to share more about like what God did in our hearts and in our lives. But thank you for taking the time to just be willing to listen to our little stories. We had many more to tell, but not enough time to tell them in. So I just want to close with a prayer, if you'll pray with me. Why don't we all stand and just do a prayer? I continue to be struck by the fact that that land, that what we call the Holy Land, isn't very big. It's 490 miles long and 70 miles wide. It's like, what, one-third the size of Washington State, the entire Holy Land. But it is the land by which where God said, I'm going to speak to the world from this place. I'm going to tell my stories from this place, and those stories are going to transform the world. And it's also the land where at the end of time, when he returns, that's the place he's going to be, and those stories will continue into a new millennium with him. And so it's powerful, and it's meaningful, and our lives are changed and shaped by what God did there, and we are changed and shaped here a world away. By the same God, his same power, his same presence. So, Lord, we come to you this morning in our ordinariness, in our lives that are not, phenomenally extraordinary in some way. We're just regular American people, Lord. But we come to you realizing you speak to us. The God who sits on the throne of the universe talks to us, knows who we are, has a plan and a destiny and a hope for us. And when you knit us together in our mother's wombs, you had an idea of what you wanted us to become and what place you wanted us to be in your kingdom's glory. And we've messed up along the way. We've stumbled, we've fallen, we've got back up, but we know, Lord, as long as you are with us, as long as you guide us, we will end up where you want us to be. And so my prayer today is for anyone who has not placed their faith in you, Jesus, would you come alive for them? Would you show them you're real? Would you awaken their hearts and minds? If there's doubt and there's questions and there's, I don't know if I believe any of this, Lord, would you do something in their lives to make yourself known as real? You sit on the throne of the universe. That's an easy job for you to reveal yourself. So I'm going to ask, Lord, that you would reveal yourself. And for those of us who've been following you for a long time and grown tired or weary or it just seems so ordinary anymore, and the power of your glory isn't real to us anymore, Lord, would you awaken us? Would you do new and fresh things in our lives? Would you put your joy and your hope and your peace back in us? Would you awaken us to new and glorious things? For all of us, Lord, we want to follow you because in the end, we've read the book, you win. And you win handily. And you will set your throne up over this earth and over every human being who has ever lived, is ever living now, and ever will live. When every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that you are Lord, to the glory of God the Father Almighty. And so, Lord, our hearts bow now, and we say, you are Lord. So as Lord of our lives, Lord, take us to new places and do new and fresh things with us. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. All right, I'm going to start a new study of a book starting next week. Glad you guys came. Please hang out and have a cup of coffee and talk to us.